Good morning, everybody. A very brisk, chilly morning to you. Good morning. I see everyone's still recovering from Gamer last night. Did you all have a good time? Did you all have a good time? Did you all have a good time? All right, we're awake now. Fantastic. Welcome to day 3 of Industry Week 2023. Hopefully it's been a really joyful experience for you all thus far. To kick off today, and what a way to kick off today, we will be joined by the panel from The Newell, our partners, The Newell. So very, very excited to have them here. And the session will be based in and around everything varsity esports, running the organization, engaging with the organization, but also how you can get involved in working as part of the production team, alongside how you can get employed working within the esports industry, and more importantly, get re-employed working within the esports industry. So remember, mash the hashtag IW23 with a chance to win a £50 Amazon gift voucher. Very, very exciting. What was that? Oh, I don't care. Okay, so welcoming our guests to the stage. Put your hands together for The Newell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm expecting a slide to appear. Oh, yes, magic. Thank you so much for coming, even if you were forced to be here. We really appreciate it. We missed out on last night because we were putting this together. We really appreciate you coming, and hopefully this will be useful to you. I'll talk a little bit more about who we are in a minute. The structure of the thing today is we didn't want to just be here for 2 hours just like chatting at you guys. That takes a lot of time for us, and it's also much less interesting for you. The plan is to run this in sections. There we go. So we're going to talk a bit about who we are. The purpose of that is to ideally set a bit of context for, like, as a company like us that works in the grassroots of esports, that is very, very frequently hiring, and also from the perspective of like a kind of company that you may well end up working for in very short order, the kind of company that you may also want to run in short order. There's a lot of challenges that we've found with that. Between all of us in the industry, we must have at least 2 decades of working in esports and working in the grassroots of esports, where it can be a little bit of a wild west. So there's a lot of potentially useful insights from that. We're also going to talk a little bit, if I remember, about hiring. To give a bit of context to that, and we'll talk about this later, in a typical academic year, on the broadcast side of things alone, we, and by that I mean mostly Becca, will hire, I think, more than 75 plus contractors to work on our broadcast. So typically during our tournament seasons, we'll be producing broadcasts on pretty much most days of the week, sometimes 2 broadcasts a day during the week. I know that just by the number of invoices that say 1 on them, a lot of the time it's somebody's first paid gig working with us. That's incredibly frequent. A lot of the people who work with us go on to work elsewhere in industry, and we sure do hire a lot of people. So there's hopefully some useful insights in relation to that. But there's also a lot of jobs that we do, a lot of roles that we hire for that people don't necessarily see as much of, that we don't hire for as regularly, with maybe more permanent jobs or jobs that are less related to broadcasts, but are still really critical to a company in the esports industry. So we're hopefully going to give some more general insights as well into the sort of things we're looking for, because I think, and Peter's going to talk about this too, we get a lot of bad applications, and we don't want bad applications. We want good applications. So the more we can speak to people like you guys, the more we can help you and also help us in the process of that. So that'll be, hopefully we'll spend a lot of the time in this talk talking about that. Then finally, we'll be talking about the future and where we're going. And I know that you've already had some talks this week. I know there was one from Williams yesterday talking about the future of the esports industry, some of the challenges facing the industry economically. We're going to talk a little bit about the angle of that from our side in the grassroots space. We're also, and then we'll also allow time for questions. So the structure of things today is largely intended to be one of us will do a little bit of a talk for like 7, 8, 9 minutes. We'll then cut to more of a panel discussion in which we are intending to have more of a free-flowing discussion between us as a group. But what I will say is it's a relatively small room. If somebody wants, if there's a question that comes up during this, please do stick your hand up, because we're it'll be a lot less interesting if we're just talking to each other. We can do that for 2 hours. We can do that for a long time. Something I always say I'm really sick of in a lot of esports sort of industry talks is you get a panel of really interesting people and then they have 20 minutes on the stage and they just about get through. What was your job before this? Whereas I think actually here there's an opportunity from people who've got a diverse set of skills and experience within the industry to actually just ask us some questions about things you want to know, and we'll have a stab at all of that. These opportunities where you get to actually go into some detail on those things don't really come up very often. So please do stick your hand up if you have any questions at any point. Talking a little bit about who we are, and because I didn't really plan ahead, Peter's actually going to go first.
Click again, you can introduce
Okay, we can go first. Okay, I'll talk about me first, fine. So this is me. God, I didn't think the picture was going to be that big. So academically, I went to University of Nottingham. Sorry. You'll be impressed by Peter as well. But that was years ago. So I graduated from University of Nottingham back in 2011 with a degree in politics. That had, to be blunt, I did some extracurricular stuff that got me into editorial work, which led to Elsevier, big academic publisher, working I was doing books on micro and nanotechnology for 6 years. Which my degree had absolutely nothing to do with. So if anybody ever talks about the challenges of what degree you're doing and whether it's going to get you into the industry, my degree had nothing to do with esports or anything even remotely related to it. So did that, went and worked in the corporate world, and that's probably the more interesting aspect of my time at Elsevier. It's very, very much a corporate entity. I think it was part of a bigger parent group which had 30,000 employees and was making net profit margins of 40% on revenues of like 7 billion a year. You felt like such a small cog in the wheel in relation to that. And to be honest, I thought that was going to be the rest of my life. I thought I'm going to be in companies like this forever, where you feel very safe in many respects within systems. Then I jumped out of that, reached a natural jumping off point after about 6 or 7 years, and went and did an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration down in London. Where, again, I thought I'm going to end up in management consulting or something like that. And somehow I ended up moving in with a bunch of people who play video games. And we played a lot of CSGO, a lot of PUBG, that sort of thing. And I thought there must be tournaments out there that do this sort of thing. And as it happened, there was. I found Newell on Google, I think. It's a struggle signing up in the first place. I remember the customer service being really bad. But we ended up signing up, and it was spring 2018, and we were literally the worst CSGO team that Newell has ever had, consistently so. We played 25 games, lost every single one, and I think around 50% of them were 16-0s. And including the first 2 on day 1. And I remember the guy who beat us, by the way, if you ever hear of a team called Viperio, they're now doing pretty well in the CSGO scene. That was our first game. Like, I had one of my team was playing on his like Surface Pro in the office where he worked. And we came up against Viperio because of the seeding, and it was like, oh yeah, anyway. He still brings this up. I was giving a talk with him in Durham, this is like 3 years on, and he still brings this up today, so I guess that's a claim to fame. But this is all serendipity, got talking to Josh at an event, and basically the question was, why did you guys keep coming back? Like, you must have been having the worst time ever in a tournament, and I'm really genuinely interested. This got turned into a sort of conversation about, well, where should the company be going? Because a lot of the time at grassroots esports, it certainly felt like, the goal is to find the best team in esports, or the best team in grassroots, the team that's going to make it to pro. Whereas I came at it from a completely different angle of participation. Like, how do we drive more inclusivity? How do we drive more people being interested in playing? Because that's the thing that interests me far more. It's like, I want to be relevant to the people who are losing every game, as well as the people who are winning every game. And that turned into a sequence of events in which I started off in marketing. The story I always tell, which is genuinely true, is that I was helping out on the marketing side, went full time, and then at some point Josh needed to go into hospital for a month and basically said, can you cover as managing director? So Josh was the founder, by the way. We'll talk about him in a minute. He said, can you cover for me as managing director while I'm in hospital? And then when he came out, he said, no takebacks. You've got to keep it. So that's how I ended up as managing director of Newell. Which I still am today. My job is very, very general. It's a very small team. I have to pick up a lot of the things that slip through a lot of the other cracks. But if I was to summarize it, it would be the day-to-day management of the business, thinking about the strategy around where we're trying to go as a company, hiring and firing, thinking about what the structure of the team should be, where do we need people, and giving people the tools to do what they need to do. A lot of HR, a lot of kind of finance, budgeting, that sort of thing, and a little bit of partnerships work, which you can't see behind Peter, but there'll be, every other week we'll be having a conversation with a publisher or something about what we can do with their game. That's a lot of the sort of stuff I do as well. I've talked for a long time. I'm going to let Peter talk for a little bit about what he does. So we're like the two headliners. These guys are kind of interlopers, but we will talk about them as well, because we're actually very lucky to get Josh and Becca as well on this talk. But I'll let Peter introduce himself as like the second official speaker.
Hello, I'm second official speaker. My name is Peter Cole. I also studied at University of Nottingham, but I did electrical engineering, which is a bit different from, wasn't expecting to go into esports and, just happened to see a job advert kind of pop up on Facebook, I think it was. I think it was like the first public application you'd like advertised. Applied actually to be a tournament admin, and I was told I'd be a really crap tournament admin, so I didn't get that job. But they said that, my background was kind of, any RuneScape players in the room? Any Battlefield players? Come on, RuneScape. Someone wants to play RuneScape in here. Nice. So a lot of my background was kind of in community creation in those games, and they were like, it'd be great, you've talked a lot about like kind of creating community. We don't currently have a community manager, or that role doesn't even exist. I kind of created that role and kind of developed from there. I've been at Newell since 2016, I say. Joined as a volunteer, then became part-time, now get paid full-time, which is really, really cool. Basically kind of, as community manager, started building up a society rep network. One of the things we really struggled with, and kind of our main marketing channel, is through societies. And a lot of societies in the UK were actually developed because Newell existed and because what Josh created. Started with League of Legends. There were then lots of League of Legends societies throughout the UK. And then gradually, as more games were introduced, you started getting more kind of game societies pop up in the UK. Then eventually you saw kind of a lot of those game societies merge into gaming and esports, and a lot of them kind of joined forces and kind of pooled resources to create like really cool communities. So it's been really cool seeing that develop, and I think having contact with those communities has been really important for us to kind of know what we need to kind of what they need, how we can help them, and also kind of what's relevant to the current student market, and what are students playing today, what do they want. Then that kind of transitioned into then kind of creating more activities on campus. So we worked with Republic of Gamers to create hardware support. We worked with Riot to do Newell Realms, hashtag Newell Realms on Twitter, if you wanted to take a look at that. That was a 2-year campaign where we provided, kind of designed, created, distributed a bunch of licensed League of Legends merch, which students loved. If you're a League of Legends fan and there's League of Legends merch at a campus event, you're probably more likely to go and get out of bed. One of the biggest struggles is getting students out of bed. I know from first-hand experience. Started doing viewing parties, worked with London Spitfire, did Vainglory, if anyone knows Vainglory, the mobile game. Did loads of different things, and we'll talk a bit about why we do the things that we've done with the student support that we've provided. In terms of my day-to-day, I'm now head of product, so a bit different from the community manager role that I had in the past. Now I kind of have a more holistic view of all of the projects that we run, and we'll talk a bit more about kind of all of the things we do both in the student space and outside of the student space now, which is certainly a change since the time I've been working here. And a lot of it is kind of firefighting, solution finding, and kind of creating processes and thinking about workflows of how we kind of go about doing things and how can I make things more efficient and kind of run without me. Kind of one of my goals as being a manager is kind of making sure I don't need to be there all the time. And if I provided people with the information they need and kind of the process that they need and kind of everything, all the tools they need to kind of do their job well, then I'd say that's a success, that's a win. And also currently acting head of community, so that probably takes up half of my time. We'll talk more about the company structure. And also did my first broadcast production last week, so going to claim the de facto broadcast producer. So so that's me. Hello, it's nice to meet you all.
Probably a good idea for the two of you to briefly introduce yourselves as well. As I said, we're very lucky to have both Josh and Becca able to join us today for sort of different reasons. So I guess Josh, very briefly.
Yeah, sure. So I think as David sort of mentioned, I founded Newell back in 2010, which I think classifies me as a dinosaur in the esports industry. So I've been doing this for nearly 13 years now. I think we'll talk a little bit more about the history later on and sort of like how things have developed. But my job now is largely to support David, Peter, Becca, the team in the UK with what they're doing. I also work as the global manager for a project called University Esports. So basically, with a partner called GG Tech, we're trying to take what we've done effectively in the UK around the world. So developing university competitions across Europe, Middle East, North Africa, Latin America, and trying to create the same opportunities and experiences like the students have had in the UK. So that's what I sort of primarily focus on. I will point out I applied to go to Trent, not as bad as these two, but I did end up going to Loughborough, studying information management and computing, which is a degree title I still can't explain what it actually means, despite the fact that I've got a certificate saying I should be able to. I think there's a common story between us all, maybe not Becca, is what I did in my degrees got absolutely no relation to my job later on, but it's where it all started as a student. So very fortunate to be able to go to Loughborough and have that opportunity to start something like Newell while I was there.
I feel like I'm obliged to point out that the key to getting into esports is not to go to the University of Nottingham, but it's like as a company, we have not planned in any way to talk about the mimetic aspects of esports degrees in this talk, and I have no intention of really, unless someone wants to ask about it. But as a company, we've hired people who've done esports degrees, we've hired people who've done engineering degrees, we've hired people with master's degrees, and people with no degrees. It's something where the degrees are helpful, and this degree, there's a reason why we based ourselves here, because we really rate what Confetti does. But it's something where there's so many other aspects to getting hired in this industry that's a fantastic starting point, and it's something to build on, and you've got great opportunities here with this degree. So yeah, that's probably what to say about it. And speaking of degrees, of course, you may recognize Becca. So I'm really glad to be able to pull her out of the audience for this one. But if you could briefly talk about yourself.
Yeah, so as David said, a lot of you already know me, but if you don't know me, I'm currently a student here, but I'm also the broadcast manager at Newell. Funnily enough about degrees, so I'm currently studying esports, but I did originally study computer science for games at Sheffield Hallam a few years ago. Absolutely hated it. Went into like the boring retail world for a while. But originally, so I came to college here, and Kyle and Ollie, who are somewhere over there, they were running EVE Online, the Alliance tournament here that some of you have worked on. And I originally volunteered for that after I left college and was like, this is amazing, I love esports, it's so cool, I want to work on events. But that was like 2017, so it's like, how do you even get into that? So I just sort of like shelved that dream, forgot about it. Like I said, went into retail, and then during COVID was like, I need to change my life. I want to go and actually finish a degree. And that's sort of like how I ended up here. And through working as a manager before in retail, I really enjoyed that. And I also really enjoy like the technology side and working on broadcasts, which is sort of how I ended up in this role, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. Oh yeah, we may talk a little bit more about your journey as well when we get into the hiring section. Let's sort of get to it. So to give a little bit of context about, did I do a fade in? Why did I do it? Okay. About what Newell is and then what we do. It's worth saying that, as Josh said, we've founded in 2010. We've been around for a very long time, but the company has gone through some very distinct phases. Very much so, it started out as somebody starting up at a university. It was your very first year, right? You'd literally just arrived at Loughborough. And very much a group of friends, group of volunteers who were trying to put together a community that simply didn't exist at the time. So I remember this when I was at uni at the time. There was no structured, organised competition around grassroots esports for university students back then. It was a group of people putting something together because they loved it and because they really cared about putting something like that together. Then esports changed. The thing grew for a start. We now have, from I guess 0, we now have reps from 80 plus universities around the UK. We have players from I think around over 110 universities around the UK. And the context is there's only about 150 unis in the UK, and we've got players from most of them, even the really small ones. So then esports also gets very interesting from a commercial perspective. Suddenly money starts arriving. Suddenly some people are being paid, other people aren't being paid, and you're having to facilitate that transition as a company where it's one thing doing this for fun because you're with a group of mates who love it. It's now another thing where people are getting paid and there's money around. And so a lot of companies, I think, actually you can see quite a few companies or communities are at that stage now where they're like, oh shit, we're really big now. We've got sponsors, but everyone's still a volunteer. And you know, some just stop at that point because people lose interest or because they can't manage that. They're not ready to make this into a permanent thing. Josh, for whatever reason, decided he wanted this thing to just continue and facilitate that handover.
Madness, I think.
So there's that transition process where we've got companies like Republic of Gamers coming in and dropping decent sums of money and more Red Bull partnered. There was all sorts of other partners involved. And where I came in, I'd say is more around the start of phase 3, where it's like, okay, we are professionalizing as a company. We want to be in a position where we can consistently deliver a really good experience, and we want to start expanding the staff. We want to do a range of different things. And you need to organize your company in a way that's able to do that. It can't just be, because everyone feels like they want to help their mates out anymore. And that completely changes the dynamic. And where we're going to now as a company is actually now thinking, well, university esports, we've got a great presence here. We think that's really, really important to what we do. But there's also so many other aspects of esports that we could be getting involved in and facilitating more opportunities at the grassroots. How do we do that? So there's we're in phase 3. I want to say phase 4, but that would sound really trite. But we're continuing to move forward as a company and evolve. But it's definitely been changing over time. But it's worth saying that the mission for the company has been pretty much the same throughout. Maybe not codified in quite the same way, but there was always a passion for creating engaged, passionate, and inclusive communities, about making esports a fun place to be, not a horrible place to be. I'm assuming most people, if not all people in this room, are gamers who are familiar to some extent with what the esports community, the gaming community, can be like. We see our role as one of the biggest. I mean, it's worth saying in Josh's case now, running this global university esports project is effectively responsible for one of, if not the biggest grassroots esports communities in the world. And that's a big responsibility. You can't just sit back and reflect the toxicity of the community. You have to try and steer it. So that's a big aspect of what we do. Another big part was wanting to create jobs or wanting to support people finding jobs. We think that esports is a fantastic vehicle for helping people find work in a range of different spaces, not just on camera or playing, but behind the scenes. And yeah, finally, this idea that even if you're not looking for a job, even if you're not looking to be a pro, there's a space for people to have fun while they're taking part in organised play. And those are sort of key drivers for us in the things that sort of push us forwards as a company and inspire us. The other thing I was going to say was, we do a lot of different things as a company. There's some that are more kind of ugly, some that are more pretty. I think for every really, really nice thing that we do, it's also worth saying there's also times where you've got to carry a fridge from one room to another because IT have just kicked you out. And thank you very much to Ethan for that. It will always be immortalized on our slides. This was the doing it for real part, as far as we were concerned. But I will say this: if we'd not done that, no one would have ate at that event when we did our finals in winter. And it's amazing how quickly an event will fall apart if nobody's eating anything. So both as critical as each other, I'll say. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Peter, who's going to talk a little bit more about what Newell actually does and the activities that we do as a company.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'll fly through this. There's some interesting sections after this. So, but the main, I'd say the core thing we started doing was online tournaments and everything that comes with that. As we've already kind of mentioned, we also do live broadcast and LAN finals, which we did in winter and doing again this spring, hopefully. We also have a university leaderboard, which is fairly new to this year. A lot of universities or societies kind of really struggle kind of talking to the university about how they're doing in esports. For football, it's easy, you have the football league table and that's how you're doing in football. But for esports, you've got League of Legends, you've got Overwatch, you've got Rocket League, and it's like, you try and tell your SU, you're first in this, fifth in this, sixth of this, and they're like, what's Overwatch? So like having the university points kind of all merged together. So like you can be like, look, we are 5th at esports. Makes it a lot easier conversation with your student union or academics where you're trying to get support. And also University World. We've launched kind of a metaverse, I think you could call it, but essentially like an online space for students to come on and kind of talk to each other and play mini games and things like that. Interested to see how that develops, and something that's brand new for, well, as of yesterday. So yeah, it's quite exciting. Then also community event support. So that's, already spoken a bit about that. Freshers fairs, events, kind of supporting varsities, things like that. And also currently doing university tour. So instead of kind of providing students with events to run their own kind of student societies and supporting the kind of weekly socials that they'll already be having, we're actually going to student unions and kind of setting up stalls or like booths with computers and big banners and kind of talking to students about university esports and kind of what is available, what is happening. Because a lot of the students we talk to don't even know that there's an esports society on campus. They don't know that there's this national competition going on. They don't even really know that, they're like, hey, I play games. Like, I didn't know I could join a team at my university and play against other teams throughout the country. Like, that's really cool. So we're actually kind of traveling to universities. I'm going to Lincoln tomorrow to talk to students about, that this is a thing, this exists. I'm kind of breaking that barrier. And then also careers events, if you can see behind the other sofa. And a lot of that is we do a lot of guest lectures, things like this, and also student workshops. So that's working with kind of the student representatives or society representatives that we work with, and also kind of talent, and we've been to, I think, a few universities as well to do mini workshops. I presume it's down. Nice. And so, just to give you some context about what our tournaments are, it's about 7,000 students. It's a lot of teams. Was the core reason for our website went down every week. But now, hopefully, that doesn't happen. The prize pool is about 17,000. So you notice that isn't as high as your major S-tier events, with hundreds of thousands. Like the core reason that most students play in these tournaments is just for fun. We've actually increased the prize pool in the past. We've done experience prizes, flown teams to like LA to go to Overwatch League. We've flown teams to like Berlin to go to LEC. We typically find that for the very top teams, that's awesome, and we love doing student experiences, and it's something that we'd love to continue doing. But we often see that in terms of the whole sign-up numbers, prize pool doesn't really affect it, which is quite interesting. A lot of teams are just there to have fun and kind of play with their friends and meet new people. I'd say the majority of people that do play are new or freshers, kind of signing up to their society on the first year and trying to find friends that also like to game.
I think it's a really interesting observation, isn't it? So this might be relevant for people who are looking to organise their own events in this thing, is that more doesn't necessarily equals better in relation to prizing in particular. Like, we've actually found this, particularly on our women and non-binary tournaments as well. Originally, the idea was, we need to match everything with our open tournaments. And then we actually started getting more and more feedback from players of what you're doing is you're incentivizing people either to cheat, to ring, or play in a way that's not especially sort of friendly. And you potentially incentivize behavior that you don't necessarily want. And as Peter said, we don't see, if you were to do like a regression curve of why do people sign up for our tournaments, prizing is, when we do this level of analysis, prizing is so low on the list of things. It's worth considering the other factors that might make people want to sign up, in particular of just availability. I'd say it's far more, like when we go and ask people even, why do you play in us versus NSE? Why do you play in NSE instead of us? Oftentimes the answer is, I was available on a Monday and I'm not available on a Thursday. And it's a bit sad from a brand marketing perspective because you think brand's so important. But then it's like, oh no, it's just whether it's there or not. Sorry.
No, absolutely. And in terms of games we do, we kind of do the core esports titles. You may recognize a bunch of them. And in terms of days we avoid running tournaments, could anyone have a guess at what days would be the worst days to run tournaments for students? Friday? Another day? Saturday, yes. So we avoid those 2 days, especially for students that kind of go to university in a city different from their home. Some students will travel home on the weekends, so being it's an 8-week tournament, we typically avoid those 2 days because they may not have access to hardware or good internet. A lot of the UK does not have good internet. In terms of community activities, we support a range of things. Already spoken a bit about freshers fairs. Can anyone think about like what kind of things would be useful for a freshers fair? What kind of merch would be, or what do you think a society at a freshers fair would need, if anything? Anything else? Should have hidden these pictures, don't look.
Give me ideas. So lanyards and free socks.
Yeah. Socks are great, by the way.
What about the mugs?
Okay, I've got to ask this, and like we don't necessarily need a microphone for this. If like, can we have like hands up? If we were to do like socks or mugs, like which would you prefer as like a merch thing? So can I have like see like hands up for socks? Oh, please no. Can I have hands up for mugs, please? Okay, that's pretty even.
That is pretty even.
Socks are better.
I've noticed you're wearing your socks.
I am.
Yeah.
Look how great these socks
I've
are.
got another question while we're here. Sorry, we're going completely off the rails. Like, who? Like, have we generally got League and Dota players in the room? Like, does anybody here like want to make a case for that League's graphics are better than Dota's? Because this is a consistent argument within like. What's a good hands up style question for that?
Are the League's graphics better?
Okay, hands up people who think that League's graphics are better than Dota's. And the other way around? Okay, fine.
Pretty conclusive.
It's just undermined me in every meeting we're going to have for the next 12 months. Sorry, go on.
Awesome. And then, yeah, already spoken about some of the kind of events we do, like varsities or support varsities, LANs, weekly socials. We supported things like quizzes and people going out to cafes and things like that. Society events, I think, and something we encourage the societies to do, and some of the workshops that we do with them at the start of the year, we kind of invite them down. We actually did one in September where we invited a bunch of reps to Nottingham here. They should do lots of different events. It shouldn't be going out to a pub and just getting drunk every week. It shouldn't just be playing like one particular game every single week. Just encouraging societies to kind of do lots of things for societies that have lots of different people in them. And also, what do you think support is most valuable for those kind of events, given that we've spoken about LANs, varsities, weekly socials, and the massive range of things that we support? Is there any things that come to mind that students may want at these events that they don't currently have from universities? Yeah.
More publicity.
Yes, publicity is actually a very big one. A lot of societies, even if we don't give them anything, they just want us to shout them out on the website, on the socials. It's something that societies actually struggle with quite a lot is how to reach students. It's something they request help with. Anything else?
Your knowledge, like,
Yes.
like what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll teach people how to use broadcast packages, how to kind of do marketing, how to run a tournament, and provide them with our software, or like our platform as well, to help run that. So, yeah. Yes, they'll ask for cash. Oftentimes, sometimes, they'll want socks. They often don't ask for mugs. But they'll ask for merch. But oftentimes you can't, rent a venue with socks. You can't. I'll give you 500 socks to like give me this like theatre. So sometimes they just need cash, and it's something that's quite hard to get a hold of because, especially with commercial, not sure we're talking about commercial later. Like people love to give you stuff. Like you'll talk to a hardware partner, they'd love to give you laptops, they'd love to give you peripherals, but it's very difficult to get people to hand over like cash. So yeah, that is something that a lot of societies need to run their events. I think I saw another hand over there. We've got, no?
It's the same challenge we have actually. Like even at the sort of national level where we're working with like over 100 unis, the hardware manufacturers and the commercial suppliers, they still just want to give us stuff, and that's I can't pay Peter with socks or like HyperX headsets. I do it with mugs, so you'll see as companies like us as well, oftentimes we're handing off stuff because that's what we've been given by the sponsors. But yeah, we've got exactly the same challenges.
Yep. And the only other thing to mention is food and drinks. When we did the Vainglory events, no one knew what Vainglory was. So what's the best way to get students to get out of bed and go to an event? Free pizza. So we were providing lots of food and drinks to events for places where, if we had Vainglory merch, that may not have been as effective because no one knew what Vainglory was. Providing things that kind of everyone likes it can be beneficial as well. And then we also do things outside of university esports. We've got a bunch of projects on here, and this is some of the really exciting things of we'll talk a bit about hiring too, the university esports stuff allows us to bring in people kind of at the very kind of grassroots level. And we actually, when we hire, we actually have in mind that we have these other kind of bigger projects kind of going on, and a lot of the people that work on the university esports side go on to these other projects. So we did Rising Stars, which was an official League of Legends tournament for women. We did TFT Rising Legends, which is a TFT competition throughout Europe. also from both the official TFT tournament. We did some Fortnite competitions with Epic, and a bunch of other international tournaments, as well as we do a lot of like wider community outreach too. So talking to schools, talking to charities, talking to organizations, kind of like, what is esports? How can you kind of engage the esports community? I think for a lot of like kind of other like groups and kind of people outside the esports space, it can be quite a confusing space. So we do a lot of kind of talking to those groups about how they can get involved. So I guess like,
as somebody who is the head of products of the company doing all of this, I guess in other companies they might be seen as like head of operations or a COO or something like that. Like, could you tell us a bit more about what your day-to-day is like in doing that job?
Yeah, so definitely changes week on week. For example, yesterday I was carrying 200 pairs of socks through Nottingham. But no, I think my day-to-day often is, depending on what project we're running, kind of setting up projects and trying to schedule things in a workable way. So typically in university esports, it's very easy to predict where the different workloads are going to be, because we do kind of 8 weeks during winter, 8 weeks during spring. So we have very clear kind of planning periods, operating periods, and then kind of reporting periods, and kind of figuring out where all of these other projects kind of fit into that. So typically, we'll be running multiple projects simultaneously. So a lot of my work will be kind of figuring out what kind of processes we'll need to put in place to kind of run each of these. Where do different people need to be at different times? How can we make sure that we're not kind of dropping the ball on any of these things, and kind of tracking, making sure that we're doing the right things at the right time. So yeah, a lot of my day-to-day changes week on week, but yeah, a lot of it is kind of just making sure that things are going smoothly and yeah, tracking those.
So speaking from, I guess, experience, it feels like, and this is something I've been involved in pitches where it talks about sort of events and tournament formats. Particularly, I'm thinking about tournament formats. It feels like every year we talk about, we have another day-long conversation about what our tournament format should be. Why do you think that is? There's not like a settled approach to how, so for example, like we would run a format for a game, or how other people looking to organise a tournament would do that sort of thing.
I'd say one of the great things that we really try and make sure we do for every project that we run is take feedback from the community. So after every single project we run, we'll do surveys, so many surveys. We'll get hundreds of responses, and it's something we constantly review. Like, it'd be really easy to just do the same thing again and again and again. But I think typically, as budgets change, as schedules change, even as games change, and like kind of community sentiment changes, we'll update formats. I know a common question we've been asking is whether to do weighted best of fives for finals, whether to do bracket resets, and that changes by game, that changes over time, that changes as your schedule kind of changes. And yeah, it's something we try to update, and something we're very mindful of, and something we try to do for particularly mass participation tournaments, which university esports is, and many of these have been, is how do we make these tournaments as inclusive as possible? Does anyone know what a Swiss system is for a university, or like just a tournament? Awesome, so most of you. So we'll typically try to do something that encourages teams of similar skill levels to play against each other. I find that the easiest option sometimes is to just run a bracket and top plays bottom. But often if you're like one of the lower down teams, it doesn't really encourage mass participation, because if you sign up and you're like a silver team, you're just going to get smashed by like some diamond team in the first round and then just get knocked out. So we'll typically kind of review formats, and when we're going through the planning stages, just try and figure out like how do we make it an enjoyable experience for everyone, and try and bring fun for people of all ranks, because I think that playing competitively isn't just for the top tier players in esports. I think everyone can enjoy kind of competing and playing. So
makes sense. I guess one area that has been particularly an area of growth for us, and this is sort of for everybody, over the last couple of years has been in the women non-binary space, the marginalised gender space, where we've launched 2 academic tournaments. We've also, as you mentioned, the Rising Stars tournament, which I think was the first official Riot women's only League of Legends tournament in Europe, which went incredibly well and was run out of here. I suppose we, as a group, I thought it might be worth talking through why we went down that route, and why we thought it was important to do that. I wonder if anyone wants to, if you've got any comments on that.
Well, I think you were a big proponent of getting all this off the ground, so I don't know. I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm just going to bounce that question back to myself then. So yeah, back in 2019, was it? Or 2020? We launched the Women Non-Binary League of Legends tournament, and that originally came out of conversations we had with women in esports and women in games, I remember at the time. And their push actually at the time was for doing a mixed tournament. We're forced one where you say like 60% of the team has to be a woman. And we ended up going more down the let's go all the way. Funnily enough, actually, I think women in games at the time said to us, oh no, that'll be like too much. Like you're asking too much of people to go fully women only, or in our case, then we changed it to women non-binary only. And it was very much a case of, if only from the people we knew, it was like we see the experience that so many people have when they're taking part. We see the demographic numbers of the events that we run. And I think there were two different schools of thought. It was a lot more risky. I say risky, like there was the expectation of backlash at the time that we decided to launch this. There was definitely a subset, a kind of ugly subset of like the student base who were very much like, we're just actively opposed to this. Whereas from our perspective, it was like, well, we think that this is a way of like, I think like a lot of people on this now, the view is very much, ideally a lot of these tournaments wouldn't exist in the end. In the end scheme, it would be, this is a vehicle to help widen our participation in all tournaments, not trying to hive people off into a separate one. But I think the feedback we've had on it has been really fantastic. I mean, actually, we ran our first broadcast of the Women Non-Binary Valorant tournament yesterday, and there was some particularly good feedback in relation to that. Right?
Yeah, I think my point on it would be, like if we look at the Twitch comment that's up there, like that's the reason that we do it, I think a lot of people can see it negatively. It can be seen as like segregation or something like that. But realistically, we're just trying to help make a safe space for people to come and have fun and feel part of a community.
I think something that I wonder whether Peter could talk a little bit more about actually was, we had to, when we came into doing our first, which was at the time the Women's League of Legends tournament, the first time we ran it, we were sort of anticipating what is the player reaction going to be, and also how do we make sure that this is somewhere that's actually a safe place to be. And one aspect that changed, that we brought in there, was a revised code of conduct and different standards around administrating our tournaments, which I think probably, you could talk a little bit about, is like actually then bled through to everything that we do. We realized actually you can't just have, here's a tournament where you super can't be horrible. Like it's like, well, actually no, this should apply to everything. So that might be something that Peter's been heavily involved in rolling that out in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges we have as a company too, and we'll talk about what our company structure later, is because we hire so many people, we have so many admins and so many product managers, it makes it quite hard to moderate or like get everyone on the same page of like moderation and what's acceptable, what's not. And something with the code of conduct that's really helped, and we've been using a lot of the Ofcom guidance for what kind of language is acceptable and what is not. Kind of trying to create the process and like kind of guidelines for staff internally of you shouldn't be like allowing people to kind of just hurl abuse at you. Like you shouldn't be allowing people to make you feel guilty for doing your job, and something like kind of training the staff to kind of stand up for themselves more, and also kind of stamp out a lot of that behavior, because I think a lot of times in esports it's kind of just acceptable for like people to use like homophobic like language at the other team and like things like that. So it's something we're trying to really like stop being kind of normal and like, oh, that's just, everyone says that, it's fine. And kind of trying to highlight that behavior as not being acceptable. And, trying to make all of our tournaments, a safe space and enjoyable for everyone to play. Because as I said before, we have teams of all skill ranges. Some teams get stomped, as with David's team. And we want it to be a fun experience for everyone.
And I think something to take from that, whether you're running a dedicated, say, women non-binary tournament or sort of any tournament that you're running, is firstly that there are tools available to help you with that. One is actually we're happy to help with that. We've spent years now working on our code of conduct, working on our sort of guidelines for what people can say, our sort of disciplinary process for when people do say things that are wrong. It's actually much more complex than people think it is. I think in the past it's been more of a norm, much less so with us, but other people, where it's basically what the admin feels like on any given day. We have quite a firm process for how these things are dealt with. But say there are tools available, for example, using the Ofcom guidelines. Like, Ofcom literally publishes lists of swear words, basically, and the levels of acceptability within society, levels of extremity. And that's based on what people think. That's based on, so we've certainly even had an appeal process recently where somebody said, oh, well, everybody says this. And I say, well, actually, Ofcom says this, the word you used was the most extreme example according to the public. So you may say this and your friends may say this, but we literally have research that shows that the rest of the UK disagrees with you. The other aspect of it that was a big, actually came from me talking to Joe Duckhouse on this topic was, it's far better to be potentially out on a limb in front of this than where maybe you're making decisions which are a little bit uncomfortable, where people are pushing back on you saying, well, everybody says this is just gamer culture. It's infinitely better to be out in front of that and taking a firm line on it than it is to be behind. Like, you absolutely cannot fall behind the curve on that, and the curve will move without you realizing, where suddenly you're the tournament organizer who runs the toxic tournament, and it's incredibly hard to escape that. Certainly the way that I think what Joe said to me was, and I completely agree, is within the esports industry as a whole, there is absolutely a panorama documentary conceptually about just how toxic this space is. Hasn't been made yet, but the last thing you want is to be the subject of that documentary at some point when it comes out. I think it's a missed opportunity actually in terms of sports documentaries for someone to do something about that, because esports can get really ugly. But I think what you want to be, if and when something like that happens, you want to be the company or the organizer who they're interviewing about how good what you're doing is, rather than the one that's being a case study on how people get it wrong. And that means making some brave decisions and saying things, or drawing lines that are maybe a little bit beyond where the rest of the esports ecosystem is, and that's fine. And certainly, if you're doing that, companies like us will support you all the way. Don't feel necessarily the need to reflect the community if you think the community is wrong. Like, there's space to try and steer it. I think would be a big takeaway for that.
Definitely. I think it cuts across everything we do as a company, right? So, like, even taking the branding and the marketing that we do as well, and thinking about, how do we position ourselves and, and talk to the community in a more inclusive way. How do we present ourselves in a more inclusive way as well. I think one of our old employees, Tasha Jones, did a lot of great work on this. You might come across them in the esports industry. Who now work at Blast, working on various different projects, doing some great work in the industry. And we took a real look at the company as a whole, right, and all the aspects. It's quite easy just to do some sort of like, I say it's easy. It's not easy to just say, oh, we're going to do a one-off event where we're going to support the women and non-binary community, try and make ourselves look good. There's a genuine sort of belief that we want to change things for the better here, and everybody's trying to work in their own way to affect that change.
I think there's also a very practical aspect to this from a student perspective, which is that actually we're very fortunate to be in a building which Confetti and the university have dropped a ton of money on. So there's clearly an interest in esports. A lot of universities around the UK, the students are really pushing, saying, why is my university not investing in esports? I want a computer room, I want all this stuff. And without necessarily, I was literally up in Durham talking about this the weekend, where not specifically targeted at them, but what we see in the community, which is the moment universities start looking in any detail at what their students are doing, if they start seeing things that they are horrified by, and believe me that there are things that their students are saying and doing in the esports space at universities, in societies, that are horrifying, that is toxic for the growth of the grassroots esports ecosystem as a whole. So the number of times I'll see on Twitter or whatever people saying, oh, I wish my uni would buy me a computer room, and I'm looking at thinking, I know one of your teams has just been banned for using a racial slur during one of our games. The last thing, your vice chancellor sees that, and everything's going to be cut off immediately. So I feel like I'm such a killjoy with some of this stuff, but like so much of the time, my message to student societies is like, if you want the money, you've got to have the scrutiny that's going to go along with that of the university saying, well, that's an official thing representing us, and you could get expelled for a lot of the stuff that you see going on. Everybody who's in this room, everyone who's studying at a university has signed up to their university's code of conduct. And I think that people think that esports exists separately to that because it's on the computer. And it's not. Like, if you want their money, you're going to have to get your house in order. And that's not aimed at you guys. It's more just I say it in every talk I give because it terrifies the hell out of me sometimes with the growth of universities getting more interested in this space. I think it's a really good thing, but there's going to be some interesting horror stories. I mean, to put it into context, actually give an example. 2 years ago, won't name the uni, but a uni specifically approached us and NSC They'd had a dispute with their society about something that their gaming society had done. As a result, the university instructed us to ban every single student from that uni from taking part in university esports at any level. And we talked them down from it on the grounds that society doesn't necessarily reflect all the students and X, Y, Z. But boy, we were close to having to do it. Like, if a university was to instruct us to not allow their students to participate, we would be hard pressed not to say yes to that. Yeah, it can and does happen. Right, I should probably move on. Got time. Sorry.
The only other thing I was going to add was one thing I didn't fully appreciate when we started kind of clamping down harder on this type of language was moderator burnout. So us being such a large community with so many students, particularly when the website was going down every week, when you have 3,000 keyboard warriors kind of like typing in the Discord, it's quite difficult as a moderator to kind of be like reading that kind of language and trying to moderate that in real time. So just if you're trying to moderate a community, I cannot stress like it's worth looking up tools like, you know, auto mods, just like any automation you can kind of build into your system. It's just like so good for your moderation team, and you know, just helps them not have to view as much like kind of toxic content in real time.
Yeah. And you don't want to wait until you're in a situation where it's happening and you've got 1,000 people kicking off because your website's broken before you learn how slow mode works, or how modding or the auto mod works, or having those tools. Like, once you're running an event of any sort of scale where there's any sort of online interaction, you've got to, it makes sense to be thinking about these things in advance.
And of course, setting up a support structure for staff as well is incredibly important. So, but
a big challenge for us, actually. Particularly, we had a few years ago where our website was having all sorts of technical problems. Every night was a struggle, where as we tried to work through those. And from a mental health perspective, I mean, that year we brought in sort of free therapy for our staff, because, you know, you've got League of Legends tournament would have had 3,000 players taking part every single night, and you've got staff who are paid, but like, to be blunt, not paid that much. It's a very entry-level role running as an admin on one of these tournaments. In some organizations, they are volunteers. To have them be the first line of defense when something's going horribly wrong, you've got to be thinking in advance about how you're going to support them from a mental health perspective. How do they feel enabled to go to the people organizing the event to make difficult decisions? You don't want to have, for example, let's say for an event you might be running, a volunteer admin feeling like they have to resolve an incident where somebody has, you know, said something or threatened somebody else with something really horrible, or there's a safeguarding issue. There needs to be a pathway for them to report that to somebody more senior in the organization, and they need to be aware of that and comfortable using it from the very beginning, because what you don't want is them feeling like they're alone and having to make those decisions on the fly. I think that was a hard lesson that I think there were times when we assumed that people knew that they could come to you or they could come to me with something like that for help on that decision, which fortunately now we've made some sort of progress on. This is a very brief section. You're going the wrong way.
no, the slide's in there twice.
Oh, did I put it twice? Oh yeah, actually I put it in there for a reason. Sorry, that's completely my bad. So we talked a little bit actually about what the company's mission is and what we're trying to do. Something I did want to throw out to the audience a bit actually was, when you're thinking about a company like us, Peter's gone at length as to what we do. What sort of functions and jobs do you think exist in a company like ours? Broadcast. Yep. I can repeat things back if that's helpful. Yeah, so we do an absolute ton of broadcasts. I think in a typical year we'll be doing, I want to say like 70 plus broadcasts, like in an academic year, once you count all the stuff outside university. So so you're thinking broadcast in terms of, like, I guess you've got broadcast manager, so like Becca overseeing it.
I mean, like, I freelance for you guys.
Yeah.
I'm doing it again this term.
So freelance observing, so casting, production, and like stream producers. So like I know Alex has done a lot of work on that with us before. So.
Create social media content.
Social media, absolutely. It's like tournament admins, league operations. Nice, absolutely.
Someone who manages the website kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. So kind of got the management of the website. I guess there's things like content management of like what's actually going out on it, but you've also got like the web developers, which definitely we've got that. There's a lot, basically. And a lot of things that you may not necessarily think of. No one mentioned my job, so I'm not very important. So a lot of these roles you may notice as I go through the structure of the company, a lot of these roles are done by the same person, and you'll find that in small organizations when you go into a place. These functions will often be considered separate, but actually end up being covered by multiple people because there's an affinity with them. But if you want to run a serious company, you've got all the back office stuff that nobody mentioned in relation to things like HR, in relation to legal, investor relations and interest. I'm working my way up from the bottom because I don't have to crane my head. If you have investors, there's a whole aspect of that, explaining to them what you're doing and reporting. Facilities, if you have any sort of facility, or if you have to liaise with people who have a facility, there's aspects of that. Accounting, there's all sorts of general management related tasks that need to be done in a company, any company, whether it's esports or not. Operations, obviously we've mentioned broadcast, procurement. So when Peter was talking before about merchandise, trying to find what merchandise you need, trying to find suppliers, trying to find the best deals you can on where do you get socks from, the number of arguments we've had about what company to get socks from. And then actually, if you think about it, how many socks did we do in our last order?
1,000.
So 1,000 pairs of socks takes up a surprisingly large amount of space. So now you need to think about where we store everything. And it used to be Peter's parents' garage. And somehow they put up with that for years. But these are all things that you have to actively spend time thinking about, like when you're running a company like ours. And in a lot of companies, that's whole departments of people. In our company, it's Peter. Yeah, sales, business development, so that's going out and actually making money for the business, in many respects, the most important thing. Otherwise, you can't keep going. Strategic management, where's the business going? Community management, customer service, that could be admins, but it could also be in relation to other things. League operations. Basically, I think the upshot of a lot of this is as a company, you realize very quickly once you're established that there's a whole ton of different roles that maybe you didn't need to think about when you were more of maybe a community organization or when it was just you on your own and you're trying to create something that's actually sustainable. And some of these roles you don't realize. There'll be people in this room who are thinking about starting a small business themselves, or maybe you already have one. A lot of these things, and this is, I think, is a real tragedy for a lot of where the UK currently is on supporting small business, you find out by chance. I mean, I don't know about, from your perspective, Josh, like having started this thing up and having to, especially where you didn't have anyone to learn it from, like some of these things you only find out when you've already done it wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard because, like I say, there's a lot of things that go wrong. And, all of a sudden you're expected to become an accountant, a lawyer, understand HR, like you're also running your products, like Peter was saying, you have to jump on doing production for broadcast, you just have to sort of get your hands, stuck into, a bunch of things that you're just not qualified to do. And you're only you're gonna make mistakes. And it's hard to keep going from one mistake to another, but it's part of the learning process. As I mentioned, my degree's probably helped, in a tiny little bit, but the vast majority of the work that I do, is largely being self-taught. So yeah, it's a challenge, and I think my advice would be, if you are looking at starting something yourself, is I think you've got to be very, very clear about why you're doing it, and not lose sight of that as well, because like I say, it gets tough. Things will go disastrously wrong. It feels like the world's falling in a lot of the time, but if you can just sort of keep that belief in what you're doing and ask for help as well. I think a lot of the time people think they just need to be able to do everything themselves, and like people who start companies are some sort of like magicians or gods that know everything and are brilliant at everything, but it's not the case. You need a bookkeeper to help you with your accounts, for example, which is one of my top recommendations, is find a bookkeeper and just help keep your finances in order, because you're not an accountant, you don't understand tax law, you need to ask for people for help.
Something that I guess in addition to that, you've got, so there'll be, we've been around in the time that we've been doing university esports, where a group of students, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, I think it's great when people try and create something, but we'll be approached by a group of students who are saying, oh, we're starting a company that does this. We think there's a gap in the market to do this. And there's a brief flurry of social media activity around it. Everyone's like, oh, this is the future of X. And then a year later, and you guys always predict this, I'm always like, oh no, these guys are really going to do it. And then it's like, oh, well, let's see. And then it flames out. after a year. Is there anything you've seen in the sort of commonality between those things, or I guess advice you would give for people who are trying to start something new to be like, well, how to make it sustainable? Because I think a point you made there is really good. Is that it's really hard, like when you're working in or starting like a small company, and you've got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to money. Like, you've probably heard it before, but the thing that kills businesses is cash flow. You need cash coming into the company. I think that was, I think for us, like, David mentioned with the different phases that we went through, it's all well and good with being volunteers. I used to work part-time to try and fund, the website or, prize pools and stuff like that. But then when you actually start, employing people, for example, which, if you want to grow to a certain point and, you're looking for something in the long term, you're definitely going to need to do. There's a huge commitment. You're saying to that person, you know what, every month I'm going to give you money to pay your rent and buy food and live basically. Like I say, I think for me, one of the things that weighs heaviest on me is that responsibility that everybody who's on the payrolls, lives are to a certain extent resting with you. If they're going to be able to continue functioning in society. So it's trying to find money. It's hard. And it takes a long time. And I think some people might advise you just need to go all in on these things, and it's like all or nothing. But I think just from my experience, like I say, I started this as a student. For the first 4 years, it was great because I get my student loan. I was working part time. I had the time and sort of opportunity to be able to do this thing. So once you graduate, then you obviously need to start making money to pay your bills or things like that. So I think what I'm trying to say is that you don't need to sort of jump in all at the start. And I think that's what maybe a mistake a lot of people make, is that they think, we need to, we're going to make tons of money from day one and things like that. It takes a long time. We didn't start making money for, maybe 6 years, until, we first started. And a variety of things impact that. It's how good you're doing as a job, but it's also what's happening in the market. You don't know what's going to happen just more generally economically. You don't know what new brands are looking for opportunities within esports. Like, you don't know what new games are coming out that might help sort of like launch the business to the next stage. So it's just having that resilience of being able to sort of like adaptability as well. I think as you touched on as well, we've very much been a university esports organisation, and that's been the core of what we did for the first 10, 11 years. But, when you look at our core mission and what that belief was of why, I first started the Mule, there are all going to be opportunities out there, and you need to adapt to sort of meet them as well. I think that probably goes with careers as well, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Like, you might start out thinking you're going to do one thing, but I wouldn't think I'd be sat here doing these sort of talks back in 2010 when, we were sort of desperately messaging people on Facebook, which probably shows you how old we are. That we used to use Facebook as our main way of like communicating with people. Things change. You've got to be able to make sure you look after yourselves, make sure you've got some sort of, sort of like a cushion, to want to use a better phrase, and, you're not sort of like going all or nothing would be my sort of advice. And sort of make sure that you've got the sort of, you sort of keep going sort of mentally to sort of keep taking on the challenges and being able to sort of adapt and not feel like you're failing when you have to do so.
I suppose then, so obviously there'll be some people who are thinking of starting a company in this space, and there are some of the challenges with that I think we could talk about for a very long time. So as Becca, from your perspective, I mean, you started in the company back in sort of September, October. For the record, I was hiring for a full-time job, and somehow Becca managed to completely upend the job description on her own initiative, which was really amazing. But I guess you came into a company, you've worked in a few different companies before, and then you came into a company like this one, where it's a lot smaller, and I've actually got, this is like the wider team. I might come back to this, but this is basically the structure of the company, which may distract you for a little bit. I had to bring an org chart with me, where basically relatively hierarchical, then it hits a flat point where we've got league operations manager, community manager, marketing manager, and broadcast manager to cover a lot. But there's so many roles, as you saw from the previous slide, that are covered by this. So I suppose you came into this where we had no one else working on broadcast. You were the broadcast person responsible for all of that. What's been, I suppose, your experience of coming into an environment like that?
Yeah, so it wasn't my first experience with a small company. I'd previously started off as a manager in a small company that had just started. So I was kind of aware of how it works, but I think at Newell it was even better. I've been part of big companies as well. Like you said before with Elsevier, you're a tiny cog and you just focus on your little section that you do, but you're so restricted there. And I think one of the best parts about working for a small company, especially here, is the amount of freedom that you get. As you said, I'm the only person that's looking after broadcast. Obviously, I report to yourself and work with the rest of the team. But it's nice to have so much say over what goes on. But on the flip side, it's also kind of terrifying, especially when I first started off. And it's like, okay, so how do we do these things? And it's like, well, we're not really sure because we've never made a process. And starting off in that was pretty scary and exciting at the same time. I think I'm doing all right, but
Yeah, for sure. Has that been comparable to your experiences then with other companies you've worked with where there's been a lack of process, or you had to be the one to create the process?
I think there's definitely a lot of esports companies out there who are kind of running, I don't want to say similar, but yeah, making it up as they go along. Things are just kind of working how they are. It's a little bit chaotic.
Yeah, I think it was something we were going to talk about as part of the hiring section and the kind of the career section. But I think we were reflecting on it this morning that actually people coming into a small business like this, which is so common, I mean, in the esports space in particular, is you've got to be particularly prized as people being in a position to create things, because often those things simply don't exist. There isn't necessarily a handoff for you to pick up. It may be the first time the company's ever hired somebody for that role. So oftentimes something to particularly think about, I am short-circuiting for the next section, but something to particularly think about from a CV, application, interview thing is identifying areas where you've actually made something and you've made something sort of happen that didn't exist before, because people who can do that are basically gold dust, particularly in a company and a team structure like this. You need, speaking from experience, I need somebody who can solve problems rather than somebody who creates them. And I've had experience of both in my time running this show. So.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, remembering some feedback that I've had, I've had a contractor who was working for me in the winter season, and I came to them and I'm like, here's the schedule, here's the run of show, here's your broadcast package. At the time I was like, oh, it's really late, I'm so sorry. And they're like, oh my God, I get a run of show? I've worked for, not going to name bigger companies, and they give me nothing. They just throw a bunch of assets at me and expect me to do it. This is amazing that you're actually kind of organised in this way. And in a similar way with our broadcast packages, when I first got those, they were really unautomated, kind of all over the place. I introduced Sheets.io, and then I've spoken to people since then who have been explaining to me really expensive software they use, and they finish their spiel about it, and I go, have you heard of this free software that I implemented? And they're like, I can't believe that even exists. So yeah.
Absolutely. I remember we were talking about Aaron, who can't be here, who's our league operations manager. He's based down in Croydon. One of the things that really attracted us to his application was for his society, he'd created a tracking tool for the teams to track performance. I think it was CSGO, wasn't it? Where, again, does he have to do anything like that in his role with us? I mean, no. But it showed us that he's got someone who's arithmetically capable and has an interest in creating things. And that was so critical for us as an organisation, just across the board. I mean, Peter mentioned last week he produced his first broadcast for us. If there's one takeaway from this section, and the reason why we've included it, is to say within an esports company, there's so many different roles. You may be fortunate enough to be in a position where you specialise. The only thing I will say is that frequently, it's a long old career. The days of my dad worked for like the same company his whole life. I think those days are pretty much gone, and your incentives to do that are gone. Back in the day, you had like defined benefit pension schemes and stuff to keep you there. Now you don't. So your career is going to evolve and change over time. You've got some great opportunities here to look into loads of different things and explore. You may reach 30 to some extent like I did and realize actually I'm going to do something completely different. So having multiple skills, having an openness to trying different things, avoiding the that's not my job sort of approach, and actually being like, oh, that'll be interesting and it solves a problem for the company. All of those things are going to be absolutely critical skills, whatever industry or whatever company you end up going into. And the benefit of that is within esports, everyone's talking about players and everyone's talking about on-screen talent. There's so many jobs that exist in esports that you can pivot into, which, you know, let's say you start off like I did. I started off as like a content editor, as a writer. That was parlayed into editorial, which got me behind the scenes, which then I can turn into so many different things. Likewise, there's so many different functions here that then actually you pick up that skill and suddenly you're eligible to work in any industry, let alone just this. So I think that would be a key takeaway from this.
Yeah, I think just to build on what you both said as well, I think in my opinion, especially in esports, I think people like to present themselves as like they figured everything out and they're brilliant and perfect at everything. And like, you know, I said definitely in our case, that's not true. Like, you know, we don't want to present ourselves like, you know, we've got, you know, everything's perfect. We know we need people who've, you know, sort of going to go some sort of like, you know, magicians, like I said earlier, that think, you know, they're going to be better than everybody else, whatever. We just need people who've got the right attitude a lot of the time, right? And, you know, people who want to come and help and, you know, improve things as well. I think sometimes people get put off a little bit thinking, oh, I don't want to apply for one of these companies, or, you know, I'm a bit nervous getting involved because they think that, you know, they've got sort of 10 years experience working on some of these things. And that's not the case. Like Becca said, like, you know, there's probably a lot of very basic things that a lot of companies are not doing that you can either, you know, shouldn't stop you getting involved in, or, you know, that's something that you can come and help fix.
Yeah, I think not believing in social media hype around a lot of this. Like, yeah. I mean, once you've been around this industry for long enough, you see the phase that it goes through. You know, I think a few years ago, you've got lots and lots of companies that with a long-term future of esports, and then they're running out of runway now. And you're seeing, oh, wait, no, all of our products actually failed, or we were spending more than 100% of our revenue on players, or, you know, we were pitching to publishers to do events that we can't possibly afford, and now everything's shutting down. Those 3 years ago were the hype trains of the future. I'd say certainly within an industry as nascent as this, anybody, maybe this is a bold, controversial take, but anybody who basically presents themselves as if they've cracked it, they're basically just, they're asking for something from you, almost certainly, whether it's engagement, whether it's money, or something like that. They probably haven't cracked it, not least because nobody really knows where this industry is going to be in 5 to 10 years' time. There'll be some people who guess correctly, and there'll be some people who are quietly in the background running businesses that are figuring out how to make this all sustainable and are going to survive this sort of market correction that's sort of going to be taking place over the next couple of years. We're hoping to be one of those companies. We hope that we've got enough of these pieces right, but anybody who presents it as if they've completely cracked it, they're marketing to you. They're not necessarily telling you the truth. And probably the most interesting. Also, actually, I did want to say, while we've got a nice picture of everybody on the team, this is like most of our team. This is obviously right here. We're missing, I think, 1 or 2 people from this. Ethan was allowed on this because he was he basically sat doing tickets for our winter event for the whole time in the cold and carrying fridges. So he's an honorary member of our team. But something to remember with all of this is that, like, some of this stuff, it's meant to be fun. Like, you can't be, everything that we're talking about here is very, very serious, but like, really treasure the moments where you get to be together. Like, I joined esports when COVID started. Like, that's when I went full time. So this was my first ever live finals that we were ever able to run. It was stressful as hell, but goodness me, it was nice to actually be back with a team working on something again. And these moments don't always come, so you really have to treasure them, even while you're at uni. Yeah, they're really precious, and having the opportunity to do any sort of event is amazing.
I did want to make the soppy point at some point during this talk that I think one of the best parts about working for Newell is that we're all kind of like a family. Like, I genuinely love everyone that I work with, and that's what makes it that's what keeps us going when things get really rough, is that we all actually care about each other and what we're working on.
I completely agree with everything you've just said, but what I will say is be wary of companies that describe themselves as like families. Families are really dysfunctional. So it's like, I completely agree with what you're saying. It's a good vibe. But it's making sure that where you're going, if they describe themselves as a boundary, as a family, that's a yellow/red flag. Like it's important to have professional boundaries, which we have.
We're a professional family.
Yeah, exactly. That makes it sound even worse. But yeah, something to be mindful of. Normally, like, you ask for family members stuff for free. You know, I'm getting paid to be at work. So it's the other thing, actually. Sorry, I'm dwelling on this, but actually, this is a really good piece of advice I heard the other day, and it's particularly relevant for people entering the esports space. Be mindful when you're doing work for a company, like obviously, especially if it's like maybe it's a small company, maybe it's a bigger company. If you're not an owner of that company, so if you are the owner of that company, let's say a Josh figure in the early days, it is okay to some extent to work for that company for free. You're capturing the value from that company. So they have a completely different work model and compensation model to what you have as someone who's working for the company. That doesn't mean you have to like create like this huge divide of like like a kind of Marxian manifesto, like workers and bourgeoisie, but it's more just like you got to maintain good boundaries in those situations where if they're asking you to work for free, if they're like students, it can be a little bit more vague because sort of this is your time to explore and try new things and take these opportunities. But as you start to get more experience and you work on more events, just be increasingly mindful of if I'm being asked to work for free by the person who owns the company, then they are capturing value from my work and I am not. So you have to just be very mindful of, am I getting enough benefit out of this? Also, are they complying with the law? Because people do normally have to get paid for stuff under the law. So yeah, that was a good piece of advice I heard the other day about that differential. The person who owns the company is in a different position to you, and you need to remember that. But speaking of jobs, we do have a whole section about hiring stuff here. So moving on. It's worth saying, and I've realised my head is blocking a bunch of stuff here. Newell hires all the time, and we don't get anywhere near enough applications from Confetti. is my upshot to take away from this. But one reason why we're doing this is to talk about all the different jobs that we do advertise for. And that's some of the ones that you may expect and some of the ones that you don't expect. So tournament admins, so for us, that's a role where actually we're starting to do a little bit more of that now, where the role is actually a real mixture of things. Some of it is actually dealing with players in relation to league ops type stuff. Some of it is supporting Becca's team on the broadcast side of things. Those sorts of things. Normally, a lot of what we do aligns with the academic terms and the seasons, so particularly for winter and spring. So likely a lot of this will be for winter for next time we do big hiring pushes. But it's also worth saying actually for most of these, we're increasingly doing work on projects outside of term time. So we've got, as an example, we've got obviously some finals that are going to be taking place. There's one we've got in April. There's one we will, fingers crossed, be doing in July. We've got other official Riot tournaments actually that we're running right now in Teamfight Tactics, where for all those things we look to the people that we've worked with before to work as admins on those things. We're regularly hiring casters, observers, and stream producers. We put Alex here as a joke, but I forgot to remove it. Alex doesn't like being called a producer. So we're for our broadcasts, as I said before, in a typical year, we're nearly getting on what's like 50 people per term plus that we're hiring to work on these things. There's a lot of broadcasts, and the key thing with these is that we are looking for people who are just starting. These are, it's important to us. Amazon University Esports is important to us, but these are relatively low stakes broadcasts. They are all paid, and the goal of them, to be blunt about it, we want to give a bit more, kind of prestige and visibility to university esports. But I'd say, as much as anything, like the number one reason why we do them now is to try and develop the next generation of broadcast talent and actually give real world practical opportunities to work on these things. We've just finished pretty much the hiring process for spring for this. Next big one will be in winter, but again, like it's hard to say it publicly, but to be honest, we explicitly look for people who are very, very early starting out. Like there have been times where putting it bluntly, we've said no to people who are clearly beyond the stage, or people we've worked with for like 3 or 4 years already, and we're like, well, you know, we've really enjoyed having you as a caster, you're great, but it's time to move on and let someone else do it. We're always short of producers, we're always short of observers in particular, and pretty much we're always looking for applications for those things, and particularly if they're from here. I can't put this on the job ad, but if it's one of you guys applying for these things, we'll be particularly interested in it and we'll be looking closely at it. Always happy to talk more about what those roles entail, but the big date for the calendar, especially if you're sticking around here for next academic year, is in winter, at some point in September, late September, early October, we will start hiring again. It'll be on Hitmarker, it'll be on our Discord. We've got a dedicated broadcast Discord. Definitely keep an eye out for those. The other thing to add to that, as I said with the admin stuff, is we are very frequently looking for people to work on other projects. And while sometimes we will advertise for those publicly, if somebody is absolutely kicking ass at like the university stuff and we know them and we've worked with them and they're reliable, we will absolutely go to them first, to be honest. So I'm not saying you have to work on the university sports stuff to be considered for the other things, but it really helps us and it really helps you get your foot in the door for those sorts of things. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. Don't necessarily rule out some of this early stuff as maybe it's just university sports. That could be the thing that opens the door to be recommended for all sorts of other things. There's also other roles that we do. So you saw the org chart before, marketing. There's marketing. I've currently got a vacancy for a community manager. Currently thinking about how to hire for that. We've got product managers who look after each of our tournaments sort of in a sort of holistic way. So they'll be working directly with Peter and our league operations manager on sort of the direction of the tournament. Oh, hello.
Hi. So, say for example you apply for like a product manager
Yep.
role, would you still be able to like kind of play if you're still kind of uni, or did you just be like kind of full time product manager?
So the question is if you're running
If you're,
go.
like,
Yeah.
product managing a game,
Yeah.
are you playing that game still, or are you technically not allowed to?
Sure. I'm only repeating it for the stream. So basically, it's how, if you're going to be a product manager, can you also play if you're a student and you'd be eligible to play? In the other tournaments, yes. Not in your own tournament for fairly obvious reasons. But like if somebody's product manager for Overwatch, they can still play in Valorant, for example, as long as it doesn't clash. So product manager ones tend to appear in one or two circumstances. One is when somebody leaves, moves on. I mean, that's, to be honest, always really good when that happens, because normally people are moving on to other really cool roles in the industry. We've had people who are product managers who've gone on and worked in League Ops for Riot. There's one who just moved to Esports Engine to do Overwatch? No, just all sorts of things, Apex. So some really cool roles that people go on into. So that's always great. We can churn, we can get somebody else through who's just starting out. Or if we launch a new game, that's also. So that's something where it's more just to keep an eye on our Discord, particularly in the off season, because that's normally when people would finish or would be starting something new. Full-time roles. That is generally when we decide to expand the company, when we have somebody leave, which happens. And again, oftentimes people are going on to really great things, which is great. There's all sorts of different things we're hiring for at all times. Some of them are less viable when you're a student, although, as I said, we found a way with Becca somehow to make what was ostensibly a full-time role into one that could be balanced with studies. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But it's one of those things where actually if you see us advertising a role on Hitmarker, for example, or on our Discord, and it says full-time, or it's just something you're really, really interested in, it really pays actually just to reach out to us. We're literally in the building just across the street. We're on the Discord to talk about whether that could actually somehow work for you, whether there's a way of making it work. Maybe it's something that we can split between two people. Like a lot of the time for us, we're looking for a solution rather than like a specific job. And if it's the right person, we'll go with it. So don't necessarily take a job description completely literally if it's in an area that you're really interested in.
That is literally what happened with me. I was like, I've seen your job description. It was very interesting. I'm here to change it.
There wasn't like the interviews. We were talking about the interviews where it was basically like we didn't have like a process in place. It just was like two informal chats that were actually like just a trap where increasingly senior people kept coming to meetings with Becca to like scope out whether she was the right person for it. I feel really bad. We shouldn't do that again.
It's just a casual chat. Don't worry about it. So anyway, why do you want the job?
Yeah. And then we brought in GG Tech Entertainment's global head of broadcast to like ask how you were doing. So yeah, but just be open to those things, especially in this space. There's a lot of, if the hiring manager is basically the managing director of the company, there's a lot of flexibility about solving the problem rather than filling the gap. Yeah. This is you.
This is me.
Do you need this?
No, it's just this. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I hire broadcast talent, because I think there's maybe a bit of mystery about the kind of skills that you need to get hired at Null. So I put it at the bottom, but I think I'm going to say it first. Previous experience is always optional. I've hired quite a few people where they've not had any formal experience before. They've just like hopped in a game with friends and recorded themselves casting it or observing and that kind of thing. And I want Null to be the first step on the ladder for people. I don't want people to think that they have to have already done things before, because that's kind of like backwards for what we do. So what I do look for is people who are passionate about their game, or they're passionate about the role that they want to do, and especially people who are willing to learn, because like I've had comments from some people where they've finished a night and they've gone, God, I've just learned so much. I have so much to reflect on now, and that's like my favorite thing to hear. And also people who want to work as a team as well. None of the broadcasts can happen if everyone's working individually. So being able to work with other people is really important. And then I have a list of a few do's and don'ts. So this kind of applies more to when I'm scouting out people. So for some of the non-university stuff that we work on, especially with TFT is like the best example, I was trying to scout out people for that. And it actually surprises me how few people advertise what they do, especially on Twitter. Twitter's the most important place. Like I was like, I'm just going to search TFT caster and see all of these people will come up who want to be a TFT caster. And then I find out there's like 4 people in Europe who want to be a TFT caster publicly. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that is the people who are hiring. That's what we do. Like we want to be able to search out and go, TFT caster, go on their Twitter page. They have a link to a VOD. You know, it might not be an official VOD, but they have a link of like, here's what I really want to do. Here's me casting TFT. And I think, like for me, that would sway me a lot, and I find it really frustrating that people don't advertise themselves, especially when I get into a conversation with people later and they're like, oh, I really want to do this thing. And it's like, you should have put it out there because I probably would have hired you for it. So yeah, that kind of ties into to market yourself, and especially when you're making applications, don't make it hard for me to hire you. Make sure you link a VOD. Make sure it's a good quality one. Like make it so easy of, here's all the reasons why I want to work for you. Here's an example of the stuff that I do. Like for me, that you want to make me go, oh, I really want to hire this person. I can't forget about them. And also, I wanted to make a point about try everything once. I think it's easy for, I mean, I've done it myself. I initially started off thinking I wanted to go into social media. I absolutely don't. And if I'd have stayed in that like one-track mind of I want to do that, I would have failed miserably or just been really unhappy. I think the best thing that I did was try a bunch of different things and find what sticks. So don't trip yourself up if you try something and it doesn't work out. Like keep trying. If you're just passionate about esports, you're passionate about the game that you want to get into, try every single thing you can to get into it, and I guarantee that something will stick. And also, it's really important to be professional and be nice to other people. The way you act around the other people you work with is really, really important. And I think it's easy for some people to think that it's not going to be remembered. But especially people who hire, like we talk to each other. It's, you know, if you turn up and you're really unprofessional, you're really rude to everyone that you work with, like, it's kind of sad, but that news is going to spread. That doesn't mean you damn yourself forever. Like, we're not going to go out and go, never hire this person again. But it's definitely something to be really, really mindful of, especially on social media as well. Like, I think my top recommendation is to try and split your personal and your professional life on social media, because I've seen some people who've applied, I go on their Twitter and they post like the most sus things ever, and it's like, I don't want to hire you and advertise your socials, because if someone looks at those and sees the kind of stuff that you post, like, that is so embarrassing for us as a company. So definitely, like, have your own private Twitter, post your weird stuff on there. Just don't advertise it professionally.
And to put it to put it really starkly, we literally have, when we're interviewing somebody for any significant position, we have a list of advanced search terms for particular words, where we will go through somebody's Twitter account, search this person, quotes this word. And we've absolutely caught people up who applied for jobs who, they had a phase 5 years ago where they said that everything was, a particular slur as like for the lols. And we've had situations with that where we've sort of said, you know what, like, I've got other candidates for this thing. I'd rather not go for the person who went through a spell of being really like ableist or racist. And it's the most simple thing for somebody to go through and basically do that on themselves. I don't approve of it, full stop, but at the very least you should be smart about, if you've had a period where you're not particularly proud of, you should probably go and expunge all of that, because we don't just look for that in the sense of we scroll through your recent tweets, we will search your entire history for anything like that, because as a company we just can't take the risk.
Yeah, I think my only other point is, don't advertise your mistakes. I think, again, like, some people like to use Twitter as like a personal space to go and put their thoughts out, which is fine if it's your private Twitter. If it's your professional Twitter, the last thing you want to do is go on and post like, oh, my entire setup exploded last night and the stream got ruined. Because if I wanted to hire you and I see that on your Twitter, I mean, maybe not at like a lower level, but definitely at the more intermediate stuff that we hire for, I'm like absolutely not going to hire you because you're actively advertising yourself as unreliable. And that's not to say that like you can't make mistakes and recover from them. Just don't go out publicizing them to everybody.
It's a risky business generally, isn't it? Because you get like the more edgy social media stuff that like can be a big part of somebody's character, I guess. That's kind of who they are. But it's like, I guess if you're going to do that, you sort of have to accept that it cuts both ways.
Yeah, I think because there's definitely the point of, if you're a caster and you want to stream or something, you do have a brand that you want to build. So that's not me saying don't go and be your authentic self on Twitter, or on other social medias. Just be mindful and think, if I wanted to hire somebody, do I think it would be acceptable to see them saying this publicly to a whole audience?
Peter, I think you're next up. Yes. So some more general thoughts about sort of, I guess, all roles that we hire for, but particularly looking at some of the ones where maybe it's more full-time or on the league operations side.
Yeah, so the typical roles that I'll be hiring for would be entry-level admins, as well as, part-time and full-time, either product managers or just full-time staff, like community manager. I'd say if you've got previous experience, what I think one of the common pitfalls I see people fall into is they have like, particularly if you're not studying esports and you're studying something else and you're like, maybe you're studying engineering and you think you're going to go into engineering and be like, oh, this esports thing looks cool, I'll apply for it. They'll send me their CV as an engineering CV and they'll go through all the engineering experience they have. And then like the esports stuff would just be like a footnote at the bottom. So I'd make sure that if you do have any experience, and be that, professional experience or even just stuff you've done with the society, don't just put like, I was treasurer of the society as like one line. Like I really want to know like what were your roles and responsibilities? Like what have you done? Like what were you responsible for? What have you done? Like even if you don't think it's that cool, like it's good to point out that you actually did something. Because a lot of people kind of just attach, I've been in societies before, like a lot of the committee don't necessarily do much, and it's trying to find those people that have done something and have been in charge of something, and also spotlight your personal achievements too, be that if it is with esports experience or not. Like I want to hear about like what are you proud of, what have you done, like what are the kind of like headline like things, like did you lead a team, like did you achieve like a particular goal. I think it's really cool to hear about like what successes you've had, and kind of celebrate those, and also creating things and developing things. Like I think we've spoken about previously too. I really want to like hear about if you've created something, or you have a particular passion for something. Like it doesn't even have to be something that big. Like I've seen in cover letters and CVs, like hey, like I played in the CS:GO tournament, for example, and I created that tracker for my CS:GO team. Or like I was really interested in broadcast, and I created like my own like HUD for CS:GO, or like my own overlay for like Overwatch or something like that. It doesn't even have to be anything that big, but I think just showing some sort of initiative and like creativity, I think goes a long way, particularly with small companies where like often all of us are trying to work together to create things. That's something I really look for. I think if you can demonstrate usage of any of the skills in the job application, I think that's really, really useful. And kind of as it built into the other bullet point too, is like show evidence that you actually have done some research. So like look at the job advertisement, look at who we are. I've had so many people kind of come to interviews, or like so many CVs where like they don't even know who Newell are or what we do. And if you can demonstrate that, look at the bullet points, like we list out like what we're kind of looking for. If you can demonstrate that you've done some of those things, like if we're looking for a team player, or like someone that works great in a team, show that you've done that in the past. Show that you have that experience. You can you're able to do that, and that when you come to interview, or in the CV or cover letter, you kind of you've demonstrated that you know who we are. That you've demonstrated you're interested in what we do, and that you'd like to be a part of it. I think that goes a long, long way. And I think that also comes with the caveat of the skills that you kind of show in your CV or cover letter don't necessarily have to be esports too. I've had people in interviews and CVs that have done jobs outside of esports that, like customer service skills for like, becoming an admin. Perfect. Like you're dealing with the public, like people's problems. That's what you're going to be doing as an admin. So even someone that has never worked in esports, but, has worked at a till in Tesco, or like, behind the like cheese desk. Like I used to be on the deli counter. Like the perfect experience for being an admin. Like the amount of people you have to deal with that can't find the right cheese, and it's your fault because the cheese isn't in stock. Like it's perfect. And in terms of interview, I think what I'm particularly looking for, and different people look for different things, but I'm really looking for like an ability to think critically, and kind of like show an understanding for the question that I'm asking and what the answer should be. So for example, like I ask a question to you and I want you to also think about it for 5 seconds. Like if I was trying to start a new tournament, which game should I pick? So if you have just a quick think about that, and if you have an answer in your head, well, if anyone was thinking, if anyone started thinking through a list of games, why aren't you thinking, maybe I should ask some questions like, what demographic am I trying to hit? How long until we need to start running this? What kind of budget do you have to run this? Like, how much time do you have for licenses? Do you have any publisher relationships? Like, if a lot of people just kind of launch into answers and they'll be like, oh, I think you should do like, I don't know, Roblox. And then like, it's like, well, we're trying to actually hit this other demographic and none of them play Roblox, but you didn't know that because you didn't ask. And I think a lot of times in interviews, a lot of people think it's just like question, answer, when I think you can kind of ask questions back and like start a conversation. And I think that really starts to show that you have an understanding for what I'm asking for. So, if I ask that question, I would expect you to start asking me questions of, because there's so many things that would impact the answer that you'd give for that. So that's something that I definitely highlight. And yeah, someone that's kind of proactive and energetic and kind of like, I guess asking questions helps with that, but also in the interview kind of talking about like why they would do particular things. So like if we ask them, about a particular thing that they've done in the past, that, they were talking about experience of say running a tournament. I think if they can say like, oh, we just did it because, we did it like it was single elimination because it was easy. But like if they can demonstrate like there was a reason behind doing certain things, and there was an understanding of, we ran this tournament this way because, it benefited these people. This is the reason why, like, for Rocket League example, we ran a Rocket League tournament. We didn't do single elimination because people like in the Rocket League community dislike that from other like professional tournaments. People dislike doing like best of 3s, best of 5s in Rocket League, particularly playoff stages. And like showing an understanding of like, why did you do that? Like, you've done your research, you understand why something needs to be a particular way. Something I'm looking for in interviews too is like a willingness to learn. I'm not expecting someone to come to interview and know everything. I think if someone comes to interview and pretends they know everything, it's usually quite obvious. And when I'm hiring someone, I'm not just looking for them to fill that role. As a small company, we're also growing quite quickly. And we're looking for people that can potentially fill future roles. So definitely someone that's showing like a willingness to learn, potentially grow outside of their role and kind of move up as we kind of bring on more projects. It's definitely something I'm looking for. Like the typical kind of journey, like on that table would be like if someone starts as an admin, they then become a product manager, and then they can kind of move on to like bigger league ops roles or like being product manager or admin of other projects. I can't remember if Alistair started as an admin, but he was our product manager for TFT, and then he became
product manager for Magic the Gathering before then.
Yeah.
He starts a caster.
I think he did start as a caster, yeah.
So for context, so Alistair, who he actually is based in Nottingham but couldn't be here because he's really busy working on a global project. I think he started out as a caster with us and then turned that into an admin role, turned that into a product management role on a different game, then became product manager on Teamfight Tactics. But in the process also parlayed that into working on a global Fortnite project with like content creators. And in the process of that, built up his reputation with various of our partners because he was working on stuff sort of with us and with them to the point where they were like, they had a big project coming up on TFT, which has since grown massively. And they were like, I want him, like, because we know he can deal with international players without incident. We know he understands esports management. Like, so much of that, you wouldn't plan it necessarily like that, but it comes from having an openness to try different things and in the process pick up skills and burnish your reputation. I mean, Alistair is my favorite case study because he's somebody who he didn't just drop in to the right thing from the start. And everybody you speak to, in our case, who's worked with Alistair would tell you that he just solves problems. Like in our case for winter, he came in with 4 days left to go before our winter finals with no player or talent manager in place and me incredibly busy and not able to properly brief him. And he was like, okay, I'll deal with it. And he just handled it from there on. I barely even had to speak to him about it. That is gold dust in this industry. And being able to position yourself as that person is, you'll be employed forever if you can do that because it's rare. We're till 12, right? Or? Yeah, sure. Cool. That's pretty much done. So the only thing I would actually like to add on the interview side of things is that attitude is something that's absolutely not negotiable for us. It's important that somebody meets the criteria we need for somebody to be able to do the job, have what we call the kind of competency. We look for both as part of our interviews. If you were to interview for a full-time role with us, you'll probably see all of us as part of that process. Some of us are trying to assess whether you actually have the technical capability to do the job. Some of us are basically doing a vibe check. And it's worth remembering that when you come into an interview, that's the goal. When Peter was saying, it's not, when we ask you what game would you think about doing, we're not looking to actually know what the game is. We're not looking to solve a business problem for us. We will have asked that to 20 people already. We want to know how you think. So when you go into interviews, and if you internalize this message, you'll be massively advantaged over everybody else coming to these interviews. The purpose of the interview is for us to understand how you think through problems. And the way you prepare for interviews and you think about those sort of questions and the way you react to them, just thinking about it that way, you will massively succeed compared to other people because you'll completely change how you'll come back to Peter and say, what's my budget? Who are you trying to reach? And even the fact that you asked the question is going to be the key part. We'll already be ticking you at that point. So mindful of time, does anybody have any questions? We've really rushed through a lot of this. Yeah, go on. You got a microphone coming.
Hi. I know it's are you ever planning on running like a kind of summer tournament like NSE are currently doing? Is it just to try and expand the growth of the NUL itself, or is it just because of everyone kind of being busy and not really at the university they should be at?
We do. We've our summer. So we run a summer tournament from normally it's like late June or late July. It's much smaller in scale. We found that so that might be why we weren't aware of it. But a lot of players. We just have far fewer players. We don't normally do a broadcast for it as well, sort of for a similar reason. It's also kind of an opportunity to take some time off. But we will continue to do it. We'll still do all the same games that we normally do, but on a smaller scale. Hello. Yeah, yeah.
So I think a lot of people here have like ideas of what they want to do, or that gap in the market that they think they found. I was just wondering what phase one really looked like in a bit more detail, like how you initially got up and running.
Yeah, I can maybe give a very quick answer to that. I have to chat after as well in more detail. But yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, I think it's about just testing things. Just trying to do very low scale, low cost sort of tests. Just see if you can get people you don't know actually involved in interested in what you want to do. That's how we did it. We just reached out to people on Facebook that were in groups for gaming at their university, and just like, hey, do you want to come and play this tournament? I mean, literally nobody turned up to our first tournament, and then I mean, we maybe had like 6 or 8 teams next time. So it's sort of a lot smaller than it is right now. So I think I don't think you have to go out doing everything all at once. I think you do probably need to ask some favors of friends and try and get some collect some people that can sort of help support you as well. And I would say try and use the resources that you've got available to you. You're gonna have to do a lot of things yourselves, and it's not going to be perfect, and it's not what it's going to look like in the long term. But yeah, I think you just got to give it a go. Try different things. You have to do a bunch of things that you're not used to doing, but it's just about getting out there. Start to do that. It sort of builds from there. We went from having literally no teams to 8 teams to 50 teams to 100 teams. All in the space of a couple of years. So if it's working, the message is getting out there. People start spreading the word and stuff like that. Then things. Well, we grew up quite organically for the first few years at least, and then you can start looking at how you professionalise and move up to them other phases.
I think we're out of time.
Honestly, he walks onto stage. Sorry, got me while I was clearing my throat. I'm sure I speak for everybody when I pass on our gratitude for a very informative, supportive, and helpful lecture. I say lecture, discussion. And fundamentally, this should have been a big eye-opener for all of you in the ways in which you may need to make adjustments to the way in which you interact, or you're looking at employment, or you're looking at working in esports. So before we continue with anything else, please, if you can show your gratitude, big round of applause.